Before empires rose to dominate continents, before kings declared themselves chosen by the gods, before history was carved into stone and preserved in libraries, there was only land, water, and the fragile will to survive. In the vast plain between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, under an unforgiving sun and across soil both fertile and dangerous, humanity made one of its most decisive choices. They stopped moving. For countless generations, survival meant mobility. People followed migrating animals, seasonal growth, shifting climates. Life was temporary. Settlements were brief interruptions in an endless journey. But here, in southern Mesopotamia, something changed. The rivers flooded unpredictably. Sometimes they nourished the land with rich sediment. Other times they destroyed everything in their path. The environment was unstable, even hostile. And yet, instead of abandoning it, people studied it. They observed the rhythm of the waters. They began to anticipate. And then they intervened. Channels were carved into dry earth to guide the floods. Embankments were built to protect crops. Water was stored, redirected, controlled as much as human hands could manage. Agriculture became organized rather than hopeful. This was not merely farming. It was planning against chaos. When irrigation succeeded, harvests increased. And when harvests increased, something revolutionary happened. There was more than enough. Surplus grain meant security. Security meant time. And time meant possibility. Not everyone needed to labor in the fields anymore. Some could shape clay into vessels. Others could mold bricks. Some became administrators, keeping track of resources. Others emerged as spiritual leaders, offering meaning to the unpredictable forces surrounding them. Division of labor was born, and with it, complexity. Villages transformed into cities, not overnight, but gradually, deliberately. Structures became permanent. Streets formed between clusters of homes. Storage facilities rose to protect precious grain supplies. Defensive walls marked territory. For the first time, thousands of individuals lived within coordinated systems. But coordination requires memory. And memory, when stretched across large populations, cannot depend on spoken words alone. So they pressed symbols into clay. At first, the marks were simple, numerical impressions, pictographs representing goods and quantities. But those markings allowed information to survive beyond the present moment. Writing emerged not as poetry, but as necessity. Yet within that necessity lay one of humanity's greatest inventions. Once information could be recorded, it could be standardized. Once standardized, it could be expanded. Accounting led to contracts. Contracts led to administration. Administration led to governance. Authority evolved. Leadership was no longer temporary or purely personal. It became institutional. Positions were recognized. Responsibilities were defined. Power acquired structure. Temples dominated early urban centers, rising above surrounding buildings. They were not merely places of worship. They functioned as storage centers, redistribution hubs, and symbols of collective identity. Religion and governance became inseparable. The gods explained uncertainty, floods, droughts, illness, fortune. Ritual created psychological stability. Meanwhile, administrators organized labor, recorded transactions, and maintained irrigation systems. Together, belief and bureaucracy reinforced each other. Life, however, remained demanding. The climate was relentless. Heat pressed down daily. Sand and dust filled the air. Irrigation systems required constant upkeep. Silt accumulated. Canals collapsed. Labor was continuous. Failure was always near. But necessity drove innovation. Techniques improved. Tools evolved. Metallurgy advanced, first with copper, later with bronze. Plows became more efficient. Transportation expanded with the use of wheeled vehicles and riverboats. Trade networks stretched outward. Resources unavailable locally, timber, stone, metals, were acquired through exchange. The Sumerians did not live in isolation. They connected with distant regions, creating early economic interdependence. With trade came standardization. Weights and measures were refined. Agreements were formalized. Trust became systematized rather than personal. Mathematics advanced out of practical need. Calculations governed land division, storage accounting, and astronomical observation. The base 60 numerical system developed, a framework that still shapes how modern societies measure time and angles. Above them, the sky became a canvas of patterns. Celestial bodies moved predictably. Observations were recorded, calendars formed. Time itself was structured into measurable units. The cosmos, like the rivers, seemed chaotic at first, but closer study revealed order. And if order could be found in nature, perhaps it could be imposed upon society. Law codes began to appear. They did not create morality, but they formalized consequences. Property rights were clarified. Debt relationships were regulated. Compensation for injury was standardized. Social hierarchy was reinforced through legal structure. Justice was imperfect, often unequal, but it was written. Written law changed human interaction fundamentally. It replaced immediate retaliation with defined procedure. It reduced uncertainty. It extended authority beyond individual memory. As cities expanded, rivalry intensified. Uruk grew powerful. Ur prospered through trade. Lagash competed for territorial control. City-states formed alliances, then broke them. Warfare became organized, strategic, sustained. Military leadership emerged alongside civil authority. Walls grew thicker. Weapons improved. Armies trained. Conflict was destructive, but it also accelerated consolidation. Some leaders sought dominance over multiple cities. Regional power structures emerged. Political landscapes shifted. Yet, even as control changed hands, the underlying system persisted. Urban planning remained structured. Administration remained recorded. Economic systems remained coordinated. The model endured. Daily life within these cities was layered and complex. Farmers labored at the edges of urban centers. Craftspeople shaped pottery, textiles, tools. Merchants negotiated exchanges. Scribes learned the demanding skill of writing in cuneiform, a role requiring training, discipline, and status. Education emerged, not universal, but specialized. Knowledge became profession. Children born into this world inherited not only land or trade, but participation in a civilization already structured before their arrival. Generations passed within stable urban frameworks. For the first time in human history, large populations experienced continuity, not just survival, but organized permanence. The psychological shift was profound. Identity expanded beyond family or tribe. It attached to city, to institution, to shared system. Yet stability required constant effort. Flood control demanded coordination. Agricultural cycles required planning. Storage facilities required oversight. Religious rituals required maintenance. Civilization was not self-sustaining, it was sustained, and that required discipline. Eventually, external forces disrupted Sumerian dominance. The Akkadians rose under Sargon, uniting city-states under centralized authority. Later, powers followed. Babylon emerged. Empires absorbed the original Sumerian cities. But absorption did not erase influence. The written word persisted. Administrative frameworks expanded. Legal codification matured, culminating in later law codes that drew from earlier precedents. The architectural principles endured. Urban hierarchy evolved, but remained recognizable. Even the myths carried forward. Stories adapted, retold, reinterpreted by successive civilizations. The Sumerians faded politically. They did not fade structurally. Their true legacy was not conquest. It was systemization. They demonstrated that human beings could build institutions that outlived them. They proved that coordination across thousands was possible without collapsing into chaos. They showed that governance could be recorded, law could be standardized, economy could be measured, and time itself could be calculated. From irrigation canals came infrastructure. From clay tablets came archives. From surplus grain came economic strategy. From competition came political organization. The modern world, with its governments, bureaucracies, contracts, urban planning, recorded knowledge, rests on foundations first tested in southern Mesopotamia. Their cities were smaller than ours, their tools simpler, their science limited. But their breakthrough was monumental. They shifted humanity from reactive survival to proactive design, from wandering adaptation to structured intention, from memory carried in minds to knowledge preserved in material form. Between two unpredictable rivers, under relentless heat and shifting skies, they made a decision that would echo across 5,000 years. They chose structure over uncertainty. They chose permanence over movement. They chose organization over instinct. And in doing so, they reshaped the human story. Civilization did not begin with grandeur. It began with irrigation trenches, with grain counted carefully, with symbols pressed patiently into wet clay, small actions, lasting consequences. Today, when we examine legal systems, administrative states, economic planning, recorded history, standardized measurement, or urban identity, we are witnessing distant reflections of that first experiment. The Sumerians did not know the world that would follow. They could not imagine global networks or digital archives, but they understood something essential. Order must be constructed, and once constructed, it must be maintained. Civilization is fragile. It depends on cooperation, on record-keeping, on shared belief, on collective effort. Those lessons were learned early, and at great cost. Between water and dust, humanity crossed a threshold. It stopped merely surviving the environment and began shaping it. The rivers still flow. The sun still rises over that ancient plain. The original cities lie buried beneath layers of time. But the system they created remains alive, transformed, expanded, evolved, yet fundamentally recognizable. The story of Sumer is not just the story of an ancient people. It is the story of when humanity first organized itself at scale, when power became institutional, when memory became permanent, when the future became something that could be planned. And once that transformation began, there was no returning to the old world. Civilization had begun,